reminds me of the Taliban when they were saying we still have the city under control, and they have this Taliban guy. Now the U.S. media used it to show how idiotic the Taliban were, and he was sitting there, and then our cameras would show that we were like 2 blocks away from him, taking over the city.
No, it's true.
But he was just reassuring the people that they were under control.
Well, see, some of this is coming up in the presidential election we see here in 2016. This is very interesting because, they're talking about these issues, but really, when you get down to the Republicans and the Democrats, the one thing they have in common is they won't go there. And when I mean they won't go there, I mean they won't talk about GMOs, for example. They won't talk about excessive vaccination and the fact that...
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Wait, are you going to say Donald Trump?
Donald Trump did talk about it. He talked about excessive vaccinations and how he didn't want his children having that many vaccines.
Actually, yeah, I'll give him credit for that. Although he backed off on that, and when they asked him about it again, he actually he also has made some statements about shutting down aspects of the internet. So I wouldn't hardly hold him up as a
Yes.
But yeah, he slipped up and said that. You're right. But I'll say this about the vaccination thing. This is coming into people's consciousness, and they've come up with these lines now. So it's like anti-vaxxer. You've got that, but you've gone from the early 90s of 4 regular vaccinations, and you're a mom. I mean, you know these things. To 40 was what they recommend. Now it seems
it's like 56 or something.
56, even worse.
Yeah, it's in the 50s. I don't know the exact number, but it's crazy.
Yeah, so there's this explosion of it, but it's an explosion of corporate profit, and they kind of don't care what the side effects are. They have a fund which gives families that have damages from vaccines billions of dollars. The fund has paid out billions of dollars. They don't give that to the families. I mean, they give them a very small amount. But what they do, if they've paid out that kind of money, you can imagine that there's a lot of medical problems with those.
You can't sue. You can't do anything. The problem, I've heard about one vaccine that, I hope this is the person you have, and I got to check. There's a woman that really covers vaccines very well. There's a vaccine that we have in the United States that goes for teenagers, and basically 90% of the cases are in other countries, in third world countries, and it happens in, something like the percentage of problems with the vaccine is higher than that likelihood that you're going to get the disease of the vaccine in this country.
Fascinating.
Right? Yeah.
That's right.
And so they got the stats.
Like Carrie Tenpenny is, I think.
Yeah. She was a nurse for Merck.
Mm-hmm.
And yes. And she investigated, and she said it's crazy because it's more likely for you to get a side effect than it is to get the disease. And the problem is the disease is something that almost everyone can fight on their own. It's like chickenpox or something where you can fight it on your own. You don't want it, but you can fight it. But the side effects is severe trauma and seizures and paralysis and of these young people.
But here's the thing. This is the interesting thing about the absolute chokehold the pharmaceutical companies have on the press. Because if you challenge it, then suddenly you don't believe in any vaccine at all, which is not true for the majority of people. They just want to know why they've gone from 4 to 56.
We just want things that if it really works, then this makes sense. But something where it's what my example right now from her is a perfect reason why there needs to be research into this.
I always go back to aspartame. Aspartame was actually rifled through Congress for the FDA, and it was for Rumsfeld's company before he was the defense secretary. Or actually, he'd been defense secretary in the 70s, oddly enough, first. Then he went to go work in the private sector. And his company created aspartame. Now, aspartame is a very hazardous chemical, and it's been proven to cause cancer over and over again. But we had it in our soft drinks and in Pepsi. Diet Pepsi had it. Diet Pepsi removed it last year. And they didn't claim that they removed it because it was cancer-causing. They were just like, enough people don't like it, so we're going to take it out. That's a huge victory, by the way, for alternative media sources, because they're the ones who hammered away on that kind of a story. And it turned out, that Pepsi had to do this. This is the important thing. Now, when you talk about something like that, how many Diet Pepsis, Diet Coke have you had since the late 80s? Think about it.
And the sad part is I grew up in the 80s.
Yes.
And 80s and 90s, and that's when I was a high school, college kid. And And I drank a lot of it, and probably a lot of people, young people like me, did too. Mm-hmm. What does it do to your body?
It's very important stuff.
Maybe that's why I gain weight too easily. That's my problem.
Oh, come on. They're going to say you don't gain weight.
What happened when I got 40? Or after I had kids? It's because of that aspartame and that Coke.
It was aspartame. But the fascinating thing, there are incredible studies that have been done about aspartame and its hazardous effects. And the thing is, corporate America rifled that down everybody's throat because they wanted a sugar alternative. They didn't care that it caused cancer. I'm not saying that they intentionally created it to have cancer. They just, once they found out that it did, they didn't care to stop it. I think that's the important difference. That's what you see a lot, the kind of callousness in corporate America. I'm afraid to say the culture in corporate America needs to change. That's just the nature of the thing. And of course, you can't really label everything corporate America, but the dominant trends, the big companies, that have done these things.
But don't you...
Obviously, I think it's important for them to have an ethical basis. And the only way that they're ever going to have it is if the media exposes the kind of ugly things that they do for profit.
Yes, and because people are people, right? Since the beginning of time, people have done stuff like this. We know that that's the nature of people, that if not all people, but a certain percentage of people are going to protect their wealth in a very unethical way. And we just know that the certain percentage of people are going to, that's why the media is so important. That's why a clean government is so important, and why we need to have a media looking at a clean government so that the government can make it work, can make our society work. Government can't be corrupt otherwise, and we know that people are the way they are, and so a certain amount of government is going to be corrupt naturally unless we have a media that exposes it. Same with corporations, unless you have a media that exposes it. And if we're going to be all tied in, and it hurts the people who are causing it to be tied in as well, right?
Sure.
It hurts everybody.
You have a business school background. When you look at this and you think about the perfect functioning of a business, and you look at the press and you look at the government, how do you feel? I mean, do they seem dysfunctional to you from that business?
Well, if from a big, large corporation standpoint, it helps protect their monopoly or their business, right? That's the definition of a monopoly or a oligarchy or whatever, where you got multiple businesses that have control. And so they're using it to protect their business. And that's when it becomes a problem, because the whole point about free enterprise is to break down those walls so that, and it's not so that everybody can be, free enterprise has so many benefits that are just beyond, making sure that they can't have the pie. It's not about saying, well, we want some of the pie too. That's not what it's about. It's about allowing innovation to thrive. It's allowing the growth of our species, right? Our species will be held back. Human beings will be held back on evolving if you don't break down those walls, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's a bigger problem than just saying, well, we want part of the pie too. Well, that's not what we're fighting about, who gets what part of the pie. We're fighting about the basic idea of innovation and human beings thriving.
Well, this is the nature of the problem. It's that it's gotten to such a point, I think, with the secrecy. We were talking about secret finance. Now we're talking about corporate manipulation of the government in order to keep secrecy in place about certain things. We use aspartame as the example. I can use 56 excessive vaccinations as an example. Sounds like a lot.
It's a lot. Well, I mean, just putting in this tiny little body,
Absolutely.
Putting all that stuff in it, it's an issue. I mean, come on.
The autism link, forget it. It's off the charts. But it is one of a series of issues. And I think that these forces that have been profiting from doing that, and this is some kind of a nexus between the intelligence services, the government, these Wall Street forces in corporate America. There are elements embedded in there. It's not the whole of the thing. There certainly are good Congress people. There certainly are good corporate leaders. There certainly are good Wall Street investors. But the core of this force, and we see the wealth being drawn further and further up to the top, it is a small group that is working through this network, and it's using that power but it's using the press secrecy, I think, more than anything else. And that's why, for me, the fundamental edge to come in on is to break the press secrecy. That's the thing.
It's the step to allowing our human beings to thrive, right? Is breaking down that.
There's a lot of things in it because, like you said, the public itself needs to take a better look at the information. But I'm inclined to think that there's a big aha moment with the public when they say, oh, we're not getting the whole story. It gives them the ability to reassess and maybe say, I'm not going to be taken in by a lot of these things. That's important. That's life-changing stuff. And that's the essence, I think, of doing the right kind of journalism. I call it dark journalism, but it's just getting to those facts of transparency and understanding the world that we're living in. It's that question. It's a rhetorical question, but it's who is in charge of our world and why are they acting this way? And we have to go back to that until we get a satisfactory answer.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, I think it's just important to be more transparent, and this is where the media comes in. It's kind of like voting. It's the next step. It was, in order for us to be free, we needed everyone to be able to vote, right? Okay, well, we have that, but it doesn't really work because we now have the issue with the media not giving the voters the ability to understand what they're voting on. And so you have to have both ends of the spectrum. Now, there is an issue that I don't know how we're going to get around, and it comes down to the breakaway civilization that people are talking about, but there's a breakaway civilization just at large where as technology and science and education becomes more and more complex. I have an engineering background and systems engineering. I've done some pretty complex stuff with, some pretty advanced things. And, the difference in my understanding, my ability to look at things from a system standpoint in engineering and understand, a big picture and how the data flows around and how all these different areas, all these different entities are connected around the world. And then science and physics and there's a education level. I look at my son going to engineering at Northwestern and the education he's getting versus people who are not graduating from high school and getting sucked into this vortex of drugs or whatever else they're doing. I mean, there's just a breakaway compared to the education level of people, right? It's so extreme, it's so vast that how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, and we'll qualify this a little bit. This is kind of interesting. The regular breakaway civilization represents a group working with technology, advanced technology that the public doesn't know about.
Sure.
And getting all these advantages.
Yes.
You are applying that very interestingly, I think, as a metaphor down the chain a little bit, just the average idea of you have a group here that will go to college, a group that will be successful, a group that will absorb.
In a different society. And I know it's been like that all through history, but I think it's more extreme now or something.
It's a bifurcation of these two levels of society, and you have one level kind of going down and this other level sort of catching on to the train that's successful. And you're going to have this split level of success where you're going to have this kind of small, relatively small group succeeding, and these other people trapped in an older paradigm, not succeeding, and their lives going down. And they're not part of the kind of government corporate chart. They don't see the government and the corporations probably make money off their failure, oddly enough.
Well, and the technology that's occurring, I had another person on my show that was talking, he was from Silicon Valley, he's a think tank, he's part of different think tanks in Silicon Valley, and his thing was, we are developing technology at 10 times the rate that the average person can even absorb it and use it. And so we have this issue with how do we reconcile that? So there's an issue with that, and so now you talk about the breakaway civilization, and which you're talking about a government, military, secret, world, but there's also these people that are absorbing things at 10 times the rate over and over and over, and that compounds itself. So they are so much advanced compared to the people that aren't. I mean, they're still struggling, trying to absorb some things from, 10 years ago or something. I'm just, it compounds itself, if that makes sense.
There's no question. Well, we're going faster than our ability to absorb the things that we're learning. This is, I think, a big important aspect of it. That gets us into artificial intelligence. that gets us into this question of, this complete mechanization